Hey, Professor Stiglitz. It's
Hi,
very
I'm
nice to
sorry
meet
I'm
you.
a little late, but
Of course, that's
unfortunately,
okay.
things are just
Yeah.
backed up.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you so very much for being with me here today.
yes,
I know you're busy, so I'm gonna right away dive into the issue. So just
sure.
recently, you had a comment regarding specifically the United States economy and the interest rate policy there. As we all know, there is a huge inflation going on all around the world, and more than 8% inflation is the highest that we have seen for the past 20 years, maybe. But you said specifically for United States that if that inflation, if most of it is coming from supply side, and there are a lot of supply side issues in the world right now, there are political tensions between Russia and Ukraine, in China, and there are a lot of container difficulties. Finding them is a issue nowadays. So whenever there are supply side issues, increasing rates may not help. It may even hurt. But of course, those comments of yours were predominantly for the United States. And unfortunately, Turkish economy, for example, have a completely different setting. And unfortunately, your words regarding United States economy have been distorted and predominantly presented to the public, such as a Nobel Prize winner is basically
Yeah.
supporting the Turkish economy and the policy, an insane monetary policy going on in Turkey. So I just wanted to clarify things up. Of course, for the completeness of this video, we talked before and I gave you some numbers regarding the Turkish economy, but let me give you some info. Turkey has around $0.8 trillion of GDP. It's less than $1 trillion. And 90 million people are living in Turkey. And GDP is less than 1% of the world GDP, around 0.6%. Turkey has a huge current account deficit problem, and financing that deficit is a big issue. And Turkey's exports are pretty strong, but in order for Turkey to export stuff, first Turkey needs to import stuff because Turkey doesn't have energy sources and other commodities. So that is why dollar Turkish lira exchange rate predominantly affects what's going on in Turkey. And unfortunately, dollar Turkish lira increased by a whopping 1,146% in the last 13 years. And in just last 1 year, it increased 123%. And there are many academic studies in Turkey. For example, one by Professor Hakan Kara. And he basically shows, he analyzed the pass-through rate from the dollar Turkish lira to the inflation using the Phillips curve. And he showed that a 1% increase in dollar Turkish lira has a 0.3 point effect on the inflation. And that relationship is even stronger recently. So of course, when we say dollar Turkish lira increased by more than 1,000% in the past 10 years and more than 100% in the last 1 year, with the pass-through effect, there's a huge effect on inflation. Unfortunately, like 1 year ago, the policy rate in Turkey was 19%, and inflation was higher than that. Even that rate was low. But then central bank in Turkey decreased the rates from 19% to 12%. And just today, before our call, they decreased that further to 10.5%. And inflation, of course, was only 20% 1 year ago, when pulse rate was 19. Inflation went up from 20 to 83%. Those are official numbers, by the way. Unofficial numbers are way higher than that. But even if we look at the official number, the real interest rates are, of course, negative all around the world, but the real interest rates are negative 72%. So this is by any sense a record within all OECD countries. We may even be in Guinness World Records in terms of negative real rates. So, and in the meanwhile, while the central bank was basically decreasing the rates like that, some journalists, some social media trolls took your words, distorted them, and predominantly presented them as if you are supporting that insane monetary policy. And I wanted to talk with you just to clarify things up.
That's fine. And as you say, different countries have different circumstances. The U.S. has the privilege of being a reserve currency. The U.S. has had very stable prices for a very long time. That gives us more room for maneuver. I've been worried about the negative real interest rates in the United States, but they're minus 5%, 4%. I can tell you, if they were minus 70%, what little gray hair I have would be falling out.
Falling out, right? Yeah.
Bir dakika. Joseph orada ne dedi? Allah aşkına ne dedi? Bak tekrar edeyim. Eğer anlamayanlar varsa ne dediğini tekrar edeyim. Dedi ki, Özgür dedi, ben cümlelerimi Türkiye için söylemedim. Ben cümlelerimi Amerika Birleşik Devletleri gibi enflasyon oranı çok düşük olan, Türkiye'nin belki onda biri olan, averaj bir enflasyona sahip bir ülke için söyledim. Ve aynı zamanda ne dedi arkadaşlar? Dedi ki, eğer ben Türkiye gibi enflasyonun burada, faizlerin de burada, reel faizin de %-70'lere geldiği bir yerde yaşasaydım dedi, azıcık olan gri saçlarım da dökülürdü, dayanamazdım dedi. Daha ne desin bu adam? Sevgili Zafer Bey, daha ne desin Joseph Stiglitz? Neden Joseph Stiglitz gibi değerli bir akademisyenin cümlelerini çarpıtıyorsunuz? Neden milyonlarca insanla bana saldırıyorsunuz? Bakın ben 4-5 aydır video çekmedim ama bitmiyor, durmuyor saldırmanız. Hala daha geçen hafta bakıyorum, ne oldu senin faiz politikacısı? Yüksek faizci. Neyse şimdi şu Joseph Stiglitz'in videosunu tamamlayalım. Ondan sonra çok önemli mesajlarla bu videoyu bitireceğim. Buyurun devam ediyoruz.
Talk with you just to clarify things up.
That's fine. And as you say, different countries have different circumstances. The U.S. has the privilege of being a reserve currency. The U.S. has had very stable prices for a very long time. That gives us more room for maneuver. I've been worried about the negative real interest rates in the United States, but they're minus 5%, 4%. I can tell you, if they were minus 70%, what little gray hair I have would be falling out.
Falling out, right? Yeah.
It distorts the capital markets enormously. So the fundamental thing that I've argued is that the reason that we can be fairly sure that supply is driving what is happening in the United States is that our inflation rate is just average among the advanced countries. So while we had a larger fiscal stimulus, our interest rates were the same as other countries. Our inflation rate is just average. In our analysis, if it had turned out that our inflation rate was higher than other countries, we would not be able to make that argument. We would say something is going on in
Absolutely.
the U.S. that is causing that high inflation, and there would be something different that we're doing than other countries.
Of course.
And it would be excess demand, or, as in the case of Turkey, also very large negative real interest rates that make it an unattractive place to have money.
Yep.
And it would also mean that, as you say, exchange rate would be going down. And that exchange rate, as you pointed out, given the pass-through, is going to cause enormous inflation.
Absolutely.
So I'm lucky to be able to talk about what is going on in the context of a long history of very, very low inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And people say anchored inflation. There is a debate about whether they might become slightly unanchored, but right now, inflation expectations in the United States are that it will actually come down.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that inflationary expectations in Turkey are that inflation is going to remain very high.
Unfortunately, it's exactly like that. We all know that inflation is sticky, but in the Turkish case, the stickiness is even more stronger than the other countries. So I think we can clearly conclude that your comments were only for a developed country with an average inflation like United States. But the Turkish case is a very extreme case. It's an emerging market, doesn't have a reserve currency. So, these kind of insane monetary policies like negative 72% real interest rate would cause further problems. Dear Joe, thank you so very much for clarifying things for us. I'm talking in the names of millions of Turkish citizens. They're being tested under incredible inflation. So glad to hear that, you are clearing things up. And I hope to see you in one of the conferences.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry that my words were misinterpreted. It happens so often that you're writing for a particular context, a particular situation, and behind that goes a lot of analysis of
absolutely
the particular circumstances.
Absolutely,
long papers that back those statements. Including the fact, as I say, that we have a history of low inflation and low inflationary expectations. So we can be sure that the inflation here, which is only 8%,
which is nothing compared to Turkey.
Look at the components, is caused by automobiles not being able to be produced because of a chip shortage, gasoline prices. We can identify the sources of that inflation. So we can say with some degree of confidence,
right? Yep.
that is the source of inflation. Absolutely. And then the question is, if that is the source of inflation, what do you do about that? The point is, raising interest rates is not going to create more food or more energy or more chips.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
So that shapes our policy framework in responding to inflation.
Absolutely.
It has to look at the details of the microeconomics. If you were in a situation like you're in, with that high pass-through, with a clear relationship between interest rates and exchange rates, it would be very, very worrisome knowing what's going on. And one of the things about economics is you make predictions, and then you test those predictions.
Absolutely.
As you say, you made a prediction that if you led to a devaluation of the exchange rate, it would lead to a increase in inflation.
Absolutely.
And so your theories have been validated.
Unfortunately, Turkey became a lab environment where we test, let's just decrease the interest rate. Let's just use this insane monetary policy. Let's just crash Turkish lira. And then let's see whether we're not going to have any inflation. But unfortunately, we do.
Your words are actually very interesting. As economists, we like laboratories.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the people who are the subject of the experiment often don't do very well.
Absolutely. That's exactly what's happening.
I empathize with the people having to suffer from that insane experiment.
Yep. Professor Stiglitz, it's great to meet you. Thank you very much for clarifying things up. And I hope to see you in one of the conferences in the United States again. So thank you again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.